Lymphoma Voices podcast brings you a series of conversations around topics of interest for people affected by lymphoma, the most common blood cancer in the UK.
Hello, my name is Anne Hook and I'm the Publications Manager at Lymphoma Action, and I'm delighted to be joined today by Shannon. Hello, Shannon.
Hiya.
Thank you for joining us today, and I really wanted to start by getting a picture of what your life was before your diagnosis of lymphoma.
We had so much planning to do. We had a wedding, my hen do, it was my daughter's birthday party, and we also had my 30th. And my little girl, who's called Ophelia, she was also about to start school, and she was quite apprehensive about that. So we were also trying to navigate that by making the most of our summer together. Yeah, so life was classed as being normal, just with a very full calendar to contend with. But otherwise, it was just like everybody else's. Nothing too wild, just always busy bees.
Yeah, and it sounds like you lots of exciting things planned with a wedding, and as you say, some apprehension with school starting for your daughter, but yeah, busy times. But what made you think something was wrong with your health then?
Well, what I thought was shoulder pain, purely from cutting out place name cards and seat reservations weeks before, started to progress into excruciating pain that honestly would keep me up at night and would also make me upset and cry, and that's something that would never be in my personality. I was never like that. I also noticed I'd start to get breathless if I was walking, while I was talking on the phone, or even simply going upstairs to do a work call. So I asked my husband one night to call 111, and I felt scared, which was also very unlike me. I'm not ever one, from a medical point of view, to overthink things or be a bit of a hypochondriac. So they quickly said they thought it was a blood clot on the lung and sent me to A&E. But when I got there, it was ruled out quickly. They said I didn't look like I had a blood clot, which I thought was a bit odd, because normally that's determined by a blood test or further investigations. But the nurse did a little Google search and I was sent home with a frozen shoulder. She did mention the word cancer at my appointment, but said that she wanted to rule that out because I wasn't losing weight. Now, I don't keep track of my weight. I've always been kind of like a healthy size. But I had noticed that when my wedding dress got altered, they had to take it in by about 4 inches, which I thought was quite a lot. But with the stress of the summer, I wouldn't have put the weight loss down to anything else. But my yoga teacher, she was adamant that I didn't have a frozen shoulder. And she said, you definitely haven't got one. You can do everything that we do in class. But my friend who's a GP, she asked me to book an appointment with my doctor to have some further tests.
So can you tell us a little bit about that? This was your local GP surgery.
Yes.
So you went back, and how did that move from that appointment through to your diagnosis?
What was odd was after my wedding and honeymoon, pain had seemed to die down. Like the honeymoon, I had no symptoms at all whatsoever. I mean, don't get me wrong, I was exhausted, but of course I was exhausted. We just had the absolute high of the wedding. It was only when we got back and Ophelia had started school that I noticed it was sort of rearing its head again. So obviously the 111 call had happened, had my GP appointment booked. I'd done a bit of researching and bone cancer had come up quite a lot, surprisingly. So I mentioned that to my doctor and she just laughed and just said, honestly, cancer's not even on the radar. Like, that's not even something I want to test for. She was like, but to be safe, we'll do blood tests that kind of cover the whole board. So I went and had the test done, and then I went away on a work trip with the expectation I'd get back on the Friday, and that's when my results would be in. But it was 10 p.m. on a Wednesday night. I'd literally just been out and had dinner, met some of my friends from work, and she rang me on her personal phone and said, oh, your blood results are in. She was like, your inflammatory markers are so unbelievably high. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm probably a bit wrong here on figures, but say I think they're about 2,500, and she said anything over 500 is a concern for them. So she said, I need you to go to A&E. So in my pajamas, bundled myself up to A&E. And after about a 6-hour wait, they gave me the blood thinning injection. And she said, I want you to get back about 8 a.m. for a CT scan. She said, and we can do some x-rays. Just before I was about to leave, she was like, oh, while it's quiet, get yourself into the x-ray machine now. At least it's done, because otherwise they'll want to do that in the morning. She said, and then you can go home. So I had my x-ray, got in a taxi, hadn't even got 2 minutes down the road before she rang me back. And she was like, I really need you to come back. And I was like, oh, you found something, haven't you, on the x-ray? And she was like, yeah, we have. So she was waiting for me at the door, and I got back and she was just like, your entire chest is just a tumour. Like, it's an entire mass. She was like, so we need to admit you now. So I was like, oh my goodness, I think it was about 5:30 in the morning at this point, and it was like, oh my goodness. And as you can imagine, trying to get through to everyone sleeps with the phone on silent now. Couldn't get through to anybody at all. And it was just a bit like, oh my goodness, like this is not where I thought tonight was going to go. So yeah, that was how we kind of got to that point of the diagnosis.
That must have been so frightening.
Yeah, it was, I think being so far away from home, this was, I was up in Newcastle, so it's 4 hours even on a train to get up there, and also not being able to reach anyone. I think there was one lady who was in the corridor with me who'd we just been admitted for something else, who sat with me and was like, oh gosh, like this is awful, and obviously you can't get through to anyone. And eventually I did manage to contact family, and my dad was like, I'm on my way, I'll come up. But I said to my husband, look, it'll just scare Ophelia. Like, you stay at home, send her to school as normal, let's figure out what's going on. Because at this point, we just knew it was a mass. We didn't know what that mass was. I said, so let's just get some more information before, you travel.
So you stayed in Newcastle then for all the rest of the tests that led up to your diagnosis. Is that right, Shannon?
I did, yes. So I started off having CT scans, further tests, why they tried to determine what they thought the mass was. They said they couldn't actually see through the mass, so they were thinking it was solid rather than anything that was more pliable or, say, water-filled, anything like that. There was one doctor who wanted me on his ward, so they transferred me there. No mention of cancer had been mentioned. I was just on a haematology ward, and they just said they were trying to determine what that mass could be. We knew it was measuring 12 by 12 by 8, so it had moved my heart slightly to the left and collapsed my right lung, which is why the breathlessness, we presume, was happening.
Oh my goodness. Did you have to have a biopsy as well? Was that done at that time as well?
Yes, I had a biopsy done, and surprisingly, turns out anaesthetic doesn't work on me very well, because as they went in, I was like, oh, and he's like, oh, can you feel that? I was like, yeah. They're like, okay, out we come. You shouldn't be able to feel anything. But they did the biopsy, and I think it was only about 2 days after that they had the results, and that's when they confirmed it was a non-Hodgkin's large B-cell diffuse lymphoma. I was unaware, though, that was a type of blood cancer. That wasn't something I was aware of at all. And although they were mentioning lymphoma, I was getting it confused with lymphedema. So both my mum and stepmom had been diagnosed with breast cancer the year prior, and after surgery had both developed lymphedema, which is obviously a build-up of fluid. So I presumed, oh, we just drain this massive mass and then I'll be sorted. So in my head, I was definitely thinking it was something along the lines of lymphedema rather than a lymphoma.
So when the doctor delivered the diagnosis of diffuse large B-cell lymphoma, did he then go on to explain it in more detail to you? So you started to understand it was a blood cancer rather than the lymphedema that you mentioned?
It wasn't until chemo 4 that I was actually told it was a blood cancer. Now, I was on a haematology ward. You'd think I'd have made the connection, but I really hadn't made that connection at all. And it was only when they brought me the forms to actually start the actual chemotherapy, which was due that week, that I realised it was cancer. And when people think when you get diagnosed, you almost have that sit down moment, they deliver the news, and it's really heart-wrenching. It never felt like that, and if I had to be really honest, I wasn't surprised. Like, we'd had a really negative year, and I remember saying to my yoga teacher, Anne, I said to her, it feels like my throat chakra is blocked. I said, it feels like a lump here. And she said, that's because you're suppressing what you really want to say. Like, with weddings, you get a lot of people dictating what needs to happen. But obviously it turns out it was the blockage of the tumour. And it kind of felt, you know what? This makes sense. It feels like it's just a big build-up of all that rubbish. So I kind of went into it head on with one goal, which was, right, I need to get better. Cancer's not a fight. I don't need to fight it. It's clearly I need to make changes within my life. So it's kind of a bit of a wake-up call. But I had too much to lose. I had my little girl and my husband, and it was the positive outpouring I had from friends and colleagues and social media was a massive driver to help me get better. That sort of really helped spur on the positive side of the journey rather than it being that doom and gloom of the diagnosis itself.
Mm. Did you transfer back to near your home? I'm guessing you didn't stay away in Newcastle for that whole period of time.
If my doctor had his way, I would have done all 6 rounds in Newcastle on the ward.
Mm.
They said I had to do my first round in Newcastle in case I had a reaction. So they wanted me in the hospital there just in case. So they did me on 3 days of steroids to start with, and then they started the chemotherapy. And I said, can I please go home? Like, I can't do 3 months this far away from everybody. So they transferred me to my hospital here, and because of the difference in time and the type of chemotherapy I was on, it had to be every 14 days. I was about 5 days late having my next chemo with that transition. But it was the only way to do it. I couldn't have been away that whole time.
No. And what chemo did you receive?
So I had the R-CHOP 14 chemotherapy, which they normally say is for those who are younger, because they say their body can cope with it every 14 days. And that was for 6 cycles. And then when my PET scan came back clear for the new year, they said we obviously don't need to do radiotherapy, but that was always the next step within the treatment plan if needed.
I was going to ask you how you cope with treatment. And I also want to ask you about your family, but if we can start with you, what sort of side effects did you have? How did you find chemotherapy generally?
I was relatively well. I think when you picture chemotherapy, the first thing I always think of, thin, frail, bald, in bed, sick. That's always my first thought. That wasn't my experience. I never had one day in bed. It got really bad on my last chemotherapy, and that's because my bloods didn't recover. So I was really low in iron and B12, and I had to crawl around my house for 3 weeks. It was bleak. I couldn't stand up. I had to shower sitting down. I'd have to lie on the landing for about 20 minutes if I'd come upstairs to go to the bathroom. I was unbelievably cold no matter what. But to start with, my first side effect was mouth ulcers. And that was drinking water was like drinking acid. It was like really painful. Then there was the horrible gut issues, the constipation, the nails starting to indent. They always said you can track your chemo by your nails. You'll see the line for each one as it starts to affect. Towards the very end of chemotherapy was my feet. My skin was literally coming off in chunks. Nails had started to yellow and distort. Only one of them is actually healed now, and we're a year later. Like, it's a long process. I also lost feelings in my hands and feet. And I suffered from nausea on some days, but I was only ever sick once, which was a blessing, because for me, being sick is one of my things I just can't cope with. So that only happened once. But I would always notice chemo was on a Monday, and the following Monday would be my bad day. That's when I would struggle. But otherwise, I did quite well, which was positive. Better than I hoped.
You know, you have your young daughter. She just started school. How did she cope with everything?
So she struggled. Now she's a proper mummy's girl. So we're best friends. She was on the phone actually when my husband picked up, because she'd come because I was away with work. She'd come into his bed for the night, and obviously was on the phone when I was crying, and obviously had the x-ray results, and I was like, oh my goodness, like they might need to do surgery. And so she was hearing that. She obviously saw her dad be really upset, and then grandparents coming round, and she could tell something was going on. But we were very open with her about everything, and I made sure she came with me to donate my hair for the Little Princess Trust. She was there when we got it shaved at the barber's. But for her, because I had no physical poorly, as she would like to call it, when my mum and stepmum had their surgery, she could see a scar, she could see a drain, a plaster, a bandage. She could see that was poorly. And then she could see how that would heal. Whereas me, she was like, what's poorly? I can't see anything. So to her, my hair was my poorly. And that's how I think she started to interpret it. Hair loss for me happened exactly 14 days after my first chemotherapy. So it was very quick after I returned back from Newcastle. And I would say it took her a good 6 weeks to even get used to my hair. She used to always say to me I had to wear wigs in the house. I had to warn her if I was going to take anything off. She was always saying to me, make sure you have your wig on when you come to school, because people won't know you're my mummy and they won't let me go home with you. And that was started to become a big trigger for her. But I made sure that I was always on the school run. I made sure we were doing parties and play dates and everything was still normal and upbeat. When chemo hit me really hard on that last one, that's when I had that one goal of being like, as long as I'm dressed by the time she comes home, then as far as she's aware, mummy's had a normal day. And I think for Ophelia, you can't blindside her at all. And honesty was really the best option for her. But for her, it was difficult. Starting school for her was really a bit of a trigger. She'd really struggled with preschool as well. And we thought this was going to make it worse. But they said that she was better. Said she came out of a shell. They said that all of a sudden she started to talk and ask questions in class, and they said almost you being brave at home made her feel that she might have needed to have stepped up and be brave at school, and it definitely changed the trajectory of where she is now, 100%.
And you've talked about hair loss and you've talked about getting wigs. Did you get several? Did you experiment? What happened there?
Oh, and I had a basket of hair by the foot of my bed. It was weird. So, the whole wig world is just an enigma. Like, if you don't know anything about wigs, you don't know about the different hairlines, the different types of hair, the different caps that you would need, anything. So to start with, we just went cheap and cheerful. We went to a local, there's an African hair shop I had in my local town, tried on a few there. The first one I had, looking back, the hairline was awful, but I only ever wore it with a hat. But I needed something just on my head. I don't know how bald men go upstairs, because the draft of walking up the stairs used to get me every time. I was like, there's a draft as I come upstairs on your head. So we got that one straight away. As soon as my head was shaved, we picked something up. But otherwise, I started to follow a lot of wig accounts. I had a friend who had alopecia. She gave me lots of advice, even looking at the different wig caps and wig glues and all that side of things. So we got some that were red, lots of different browns, blondes. I didn't go down the rainbow route. I know a lot of people start going for purples and pinks and have fun with it. But I was like, I think I want to still look like me for Ophelia. I think if I start going a bit out there with hair, that might derail her a bit more. So hair loss for me in itself wasn't traumatizing. I mean, I was happy to kind of have the freedom of wigs, to be honest. Getting ready in the morning would be like, whew, I look great within 2 minutes. And luckily, my eyebrows and eyelashes didn't fall out till the very end. And I don't think you look sick until your eyelashes and eyebrows go. And then I feel like you do look really poorly. But the transfer tattoo eyebrows, they were amazing. I even said to one of my friends, I'm going to shave my eyebrows off every day and use these. Like, people pay money for eyebrows like that. So I was like, this is amazing. Like this, you look put together every day. And I think with Ophelia, the whole hair side of things didn't really start to click until we had a play date where her friend came over to the house. They were playing dress up. Her friend dressed up as Ariel. And my red wig, which was my Ariel wig, as it's now known, she came down in the red wig and she was like, look, Shannon, I'm Ariel. And I was like, oh, you look beautiful. And they'd all been in my wig basket. And I could see in Ophelia's eyes that moment where she just thought, oh, mummy just plays dress up. And it was almost like just watching her realise, and it came from her friend, that even her friend could make that connection. So then she started to ask, oh, mummy, could I bush your hair? Like when I was putting you have to always, with wigs, have a wig band on while you glue it down. So she was like, oh, could I brush it while you're gluing it down? Or would you like an Anna plait or an Elsa plait? And then she'd want to plait the hair. I think even with the children in her class, I was always very open for them to ask questions. I think their parents were uncomfortable with how brazen the children were. You could see them on the playground like, don't ask, don't ask. But I would always say to them, of course, do you want to see what my hair looks like now? Do you want to feel it? Because for children, it's very obvious if one day I've got red long hair and the next day I've got a short brown wig, like little Bob. So I'd hope that for them, it helped them take the fear out of it so they could be understanding and compassionate to someone in their life further down the line who might be suffering from hair loss.
Mm. A lot of people say that they find wigs quite itchy. Did you struggle with that, or was it okay?
And they are so itchy. I think when you're really bald, super smooth is not too bad. But when you start to get a little bit of a bristle, it's almost like that will catch in like the lace net. And that used to be sometimes you'd be, oh, I can't wait to get this wig off. So as my hair was growing back, that was a bit of a difficult one. And it's only as my hair has now got to the length it's at where I could just about get it in a bubble. I mean, and it's an inch, we're talking an inch. But it means I can now use like a clip-in ponytail. And it means that I don't have to have something that's a full headpiece. And that's been really nice. But yes, it definitely depends on what wig you get. And wigs can be expensive. If you want a human hair wig, you know, you're talking £1,000 plus. But luckily, my insurance that I have through work gave me a wig allowance. So I was able to get some better quality synthetic wigs that were a lot nicer to wear and looked very realistic. You couldn't tell at all once they were on.
Brilliant. Now, you said that the last chemotherapy was really tough. If you could talk me through that last bit, and then as treatment comes to an end, how did you feel? Was it a sort of hallelujah moment, or did it feel an anticlimax, or what?
The end of treatment for me was the 9th of December. It got delayed slightly. So I was thinking, oh, I should feel better for Christmas. Because I was thinking that's a good like kind of 3 weeks away. So I was like, so I should feel better for Christmas. Boy, was I wrong, because my bloods didn't recover at all. And that's when I started to feel really bad. And they did say to me on the phone, your blood level is at 79. Now, anything that was at 80 and below needed a blood transfusion. But because it was Christmas, they were like, would you be able to almost ride it out and see if we can recover it on your own? And that did take a while. That was the hardest bit. And it did get to a bit where I thought, oh, I'm flagging a bit now. This is taking a while. And I don't know how much more of crawling around my house I can take. Everything was effort. Even eating, that was effort. It was so much energy to go into that. So when I started to notice that my bloods were recovering and I was feeling a bit better, and we got the news then of being in remission, I was like, right, I just want to get my life back now.
I know that work played an important part at the beginning of your story. Did you manage to continue working after your diagnosis?
I worked full time. I'd literally just been moved to another department. I was just settling into the role when obviously I got diagnosed. So because I got diagnosed at work, my manager had to come and sit with me in the hospital till family arrived. But yes, so they instantly signed me off and said, until you're up and running. And then I came back. Originally, the plan was to do part-time, phase it. And I said, oh, well, just go full-time and then I'll know if it's too much and then we can cut it back. So pretty much stayed full-time and that's where I am now working. Me and my husband work for the same company, just 2 different departments. So I go up to the office once a month. He pretty much does the same. To start with, Ophelia used to hate us going up because I think she thought, well, when you go up there, you don't come back. Or if you do come back, you're poorly. Or I have to come up there and stay in a hotel to see you in hospital. So that used to trigger her for the first 3 or 4 trips. She would get very nervous about us going back to Newcastle. But now she realises I always come home with a present. I think I've started to make her realise that Newcastle isn't bad anymore. And hopefully she's not, quite as terrified of us going away anymore. I think that was a big thing for her to overcome, was kind of revisiting that journey as well, on top of everything else. I mean, it's still hard now. Every twinge you think, oh, it's back. Like, I had shoulder pain the other day and I thought, oh, it's back. Then you think, well, no, Shannon, you went and did weights at a Pilates class. That's why your shoulder probably hurts. So it's constantly in the back of your mind. But at the same time, it's made me make so many changes in my life, whether it's how I eat, what I put on and in my body, how we clean the house, making sure you're outside for fresh air and sunshine every day. And, cancer for me was that nudge to change, to set boundaries, reevaluate relationships, just learn compassion especially on a level that you would never normally get to experience before. Like silly things, like I never go to the shop and you think you have a mother and baby space and you have disabled spaces. I think there should be a medical space, because to get to a shop and actually do a shop when you're going through treatment takes so much energy. That could be all you could do all day, that being able to park by the front of that shop is a lifesaver. And being like, just understanding things that you would never normally come across. They always say the body will whisper before it has to shout. And I think that was my body's last call, to be like, no, you actually need to listen now. Things have got to change. So I think last treatment was tough. I think it was harder because I knew the recovery wasn't chemotherapy related. It was the blood not recovering that was the problem. And that's what took much lengthier time to kind of get back to normal.
And you said you were trying out to find out what the new normal was. Were you surprised at how far you could go, or were you surprised at how little you could do? Where would you sort of place that?
Now, this is going to sound quite odd, Anne, but you know the song No Scrubs? I don't know. Now, when my tumour was at its biggest, I couldn't sing that the whole way through. When it came on the radio on one of the school runs and I sang that rap from start to finish without, I thought, it's worked. Like the tumour must be smaller. Like it would start to measure it by really silly things. And Monday nights I go to line dancing. Now, I'd only been doing it for a few months before being diagnosed. And when I first got back, my legs would give way. I physically couldn't do like the hour class. But then the next week it was like, I actually did that whole class without sitting down. Or actually I could do this particular footwork, which I couldn't do last week. So you just started to think, let's just do exactly what you can and just go from there. And I was surprised at how much I could do, but I had lost a lot of weight and I'd lost a lot of strength. And it was just regaining that back. Yeah, it was interesting to see how quickly your body recovers. I didn't think it would recover quite as fast as it did. But it took a little while to get back to my pre-chemo weight. That was a goal, just to get back to that kind of healthy weight again, because it was a lot to lose.
And it sounds like the exercise that you were already doing anyway, you were able to adapt to use it as a form of rebuilding your energy and strength. So that sounds as though it was incredibly successful in doing that for you. Were there other things like, did you need any psychological support or anything like that helped?
Well, when I was going through treatment, I kind of threw everything at it. I didn't just go down medical. So I went down the route of holistic therapies as well. And one of them was belief coding, and I think it's myofascial release. And that works on more of the emotional side and the emotional traumas. And I think a lot of people I spoke to who've had cancer say they're in survival mode for treatment. And it's only when they get the remission news that all of a sudden it comes crashing down and reality hits and they start to process what's just happened. But I think by doing belief coding, myofascial release and working on the emotional side helped me do that within my treatment time. So when I finished treatment, it didn't feel like, oh gosh, it's really hit home now what I've been through. And I think that was definitely beneficial to work on that during the time. I always said week 1, when chemo's still in your blood, that was my medical time. So I followed all my medical advice. Week 2, as I'm going holistic, I'll throw everything at it. CMOS, rebounding, supplements. I will throw anything at this for this week in the hope that something will help me recover a bit quicker. If I could have knocked an extra chemo off at the end, that would have been even great. But my consultant was like, you're doing 6. You're doing 6 rounds. And I was like, oh, could we barter for 5? He's like, no, you've got to do 6. It's definitely, I think, working on that emotional side and the additional areas that you can look into gives you another thing to focus on rather than just dealing with the cancer.
Can I ask you, Shannon, how do you feel your diagnosis of diffuse large B-cell lymphoma has impacted your life? Do you feel like you're a different person to the person you were beforehand?
I would say yes, definitely. No one expects to have cancer. Even when you get given the figures of, 1 in 2 of us will get cancer, you always think, not me. But having cancer, it feels like that was my path. They always say you have a soul contract. Your soul signs you up for things before you come to Earth. And I don't think my soul would sign me up for more than I could sort of manage. and it feels like this was meant for me. And this is the path I was supposed to be on, and I'll take that. I feel like that's definitely something that I was supposed to experience in this particular lifetime. So definitely has changed me, but I would say changed me for the better. There's been a lot of change that I've made, especially with relationships and from an emotional level, that I think will help me even be a better parent to Ophelia.
And, you know, you've talked about having Ophelia. I wonder whether you have any tips that you could give to people who've got young children who are facing a diagnosis of lymphoma.
100%. I think you've got to be open. You've got to be honest. You can't hide much from children. They are so clever. They pick up on conversations and energy, and they know way more than they let on. So we asked Ophelia's school literally once a week. She had a favourite teacher from when she was at preschool. And I said, could you just take her off to the library? You know, let her just talk. And they said she would walk in and it would be like word vomit. She went, Mummy lost her hair this week. Mummy's eyebrows fell out. It would all come out. We said, look, she's not one to open up. So anything to encourage that would be great. You know, take them to the hairdressers if you're going to go and donate your hair and say, I'm going to help another little girl have their new hair. You know, take them to get it shaved so they can see it. They don't just come home one day and it's happened. And also let them ask questions, speak about what they're scared about, and allow them to process it in their own time. Don't try and rush it. Definitely don't try and push them to be like, no, this is what, this is just what Mummy's like now. Got to get used to it. I think definitely just let them step back, because we've got one lady I speak to who owns a wig company. She said the majority of mums that come in, they come in upset because their child won't look at them. They won't let them hold them. They won't come for a cuddle. They don't want mummy to do bedtime stories. And they said that's what hurts the most, because it's like a rejection. When I was in hospital, Ophelia wouldn't sit on my hospital bed. She wouldn't FaceTime me when she was at home. And that's harder than anything else. And I think don't take that as a negative or a rejection. They're processing and they will come to you in their own time. So I think that would be my biggest advice, is let them feel what they need to feel and don't take it personally.
I believe your dad wrote a book for you. Can you tell me a little bit more about that?
Yes, so my dad wrote a book for Ophelia and I. So he came to visit me when I was going through treatment, and he really liked the way that he saw me and Ophelia interact when it came to the hair loss side of things. And at the time she was on her iPad using a colouring app. She used to love doing this colouring app. And I think he got inspired of thinking, maybe we could do he's a designer, you see, like more into technical side. So he thought, maybe if I did an app where she could create a wig for mummy, and she could like colour and draw in the wigs for mum. And I think that kind of sparked the idea behind the book. So he worked on it secretly with my auntie. She was the one who illustrated it. And they asked me to have a call to show me sort of a finished product. And I was honestly blown away. Like, I had no idea my family were as talented as that. And I thought, this is too good not to share. So I put the idea forward into making it a bit of a bigger project. And that's when we looked at raising money for Lymphoma Action and working to make sure that this was a tool available to people who needed it in areas they needed it. And it's called My Mum's a Chameleon. And it just explores how mummy can change her look every day to suit her mood. And the feedback we've had from the children has been amazing. They love it. There's a hidden chameleon on each page. They love to find it. We do lots of events now to raise money. We don't just sell the book anymore. We've also got sun catchers, 3D puzzles, beaded chameleons. So lots of different ways that children can get involved in as many events as we can in areas that you wouldn't normally expect to be put in front of people who might not have seen something like this. So we're just there as a support, because I think if that had been available to me when I went through it, it would have helped Ophelia massively, and just changes the narrative, takes the fear out of it, which I think for children, that's the biggest thing, isn't it? Cancer's scary. So we take the fear out of it, all of a sudden it becomes something that's easier to approach. So we have a website, mymumsachameleon.org. There's an ebook, audiobook, and the physical copy. We are available in Waterstones as well, but otherwise feel free to reach out on the Instagram or the website, and we would be able to organise a collection or a separate delivery.
do you think your outlook on life has helped you cope with your lymphoma?
I've always been very open. I've never been religious, but I've always been very open about sort of more like the universe has got things planned, rather than sort of like a god or anything. So when I was going through cancer, it was like, well, this is in my path. Just trust it. Just trust that this is what you're supposed to be doing, and there's a reason for it that will come. A lot of people, like you say, feel very hard to stay positive through treatment, and religion can help people in lots of different ways. But for me, kind of that understanding, for me, it just takes the fear out of it completely, of being like, yeah, like if this is your path, it's your path for a reason. So we don't need to sit here and worry about it. So for me, that was definitely probably a coping mechanism around it not being like, oh my gosh, this is like the worst thing in the world to ever happen. It definitely took that away.
What does life look like now? Do you feel like things are positive? There are exciting things happening in your life, Shannon?
Yes, so we are pregnant with our second baby, which we found out last week is a baby boy. So
Wow.
we are having a baby boy due in July. This baby is obviously within the 2-year limit of chemotherapy. So normally you are advised not to have children 2 years after chemotherapy. So it's a completely different pregnancy to last time because you're classed as more high risk. And that's purely just because of the chemotherapy, not because of anything happening with pregnancy. But it's busy. It's busy, but with purpose. That's what life feels like at the moment. I set myself boundaries and limits. I used to be very hard on myself with a to-do list, that if the to-do list is happening and I'm up till 1 a.m. to do that to-do list, it's because it's happening. Whereas now I'm much more relaxed. It's a bit more focus on just time with family, and there's no stresses, like my husband doing the school run in the morning, and he's like, it's 8:25, I've got to go, and I'm like, it's fine, as long as we're all okay in the morning, she'll get there when she gets there. It's not worth the meltdown. I think it's just much more of a relaxed approach. And you do definitely change your outlook, and you change the things that are worth stressing over as opposed to the things that really do not matter.
I've got a couple of extra questions that I'd like to ask you. That we do actually ask everybody. And the first one, Shannon, is what brings you joy?
What brings me joy? It has to be my daughter. I know I pipe on about her all the time, but she is just like my bestest friend. She's what I live for. And spending any kind of time with her and understanding her is just everything to me. But also for me, bringing me joy is anything to spending like the slow days. When you just spend days, baking bread, and you got the patio door open and you can feel the fresh air, and just having the really little moments. I think that they bring so much joy. Like your song comes on the radio that you like, or you go to a really nice yoga class, and I don't know, just lots of things that I think people take for granted. And I think, like I read the other day, if you have an option, you're privileged. And I think that's also very true. To go, have I got the option that I want to go for a walk, or do I want to read a book in the garden? You think that's a privilege. We have a choice. And like just reading a good book and being in the sun, that's beautiful.
And the other question is, what one thing has helped you with your lymphoma and living with lymphoma, do you think?
I have to say the positive outlook from everybody on the outside. So when I was in Newcastle, because obviously I was away with work, I was updating everyone through phone calls. But by the time you phoned your auntie, your mum, your dad, your husband, you're like 4 hours in, Anne, and you think, I've now got another update from the doctor. I've got to go back on it again. I felt like I was constantly on my phone. So I said to everybody, I'm going to go onto Instagram and just do Instagram stories, and you can all watch it on there. I get to do one update and leave it as it was. I felt like an influencer, and my phone was pinging left, right, and centre. I've never felt anything like it. And the messages I get, I had friends who had cancer. I had no idea they had it, were going through treatment, and they went, oh my goodness, I've not told anybody. If you feel that you can talk about it and open up your story, I think you'll be unbelievably surprised at how many people you're actually inadvertently helping, and being able to talk about it and give that space where they can come to you for advice was probably the biggest thing to help me through that lymphoma journey.
Well, Shannon, thank you so much for spending the time with us and talking to us and supporting others today. Really appreciate it. And We wish you very well with your pregnancy and your new addition to the family.
Yes, no, thank you so much. We can't wait to welcome him. Now we have to just pick a boy's name because turns out boys' names are very hard.
Well, we wish you every joy with that.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
For more information about lymphoma and the support we can offer to people affected by the condition, please visit the Lymphoma Action website at www.lymphoma-action.org.uk. Lymphoma Action. Inform, support, connect.